Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, committee members, for the opportunity to present House Bill 54, forbidding unlawful representation of role-playing in educational spaces, known as the FURRIES Act. Texas is at a crossroads. We have taken great strides toward improving educational quality, access, and safety these last few sessions. Educating our children is our responsibility as parents. Ensuring a high-quality education is our mission as the representatives of our communities. When reports of the presence of a furry in the school surfaced in Smithville ISD, my hometown, I immediately grew concerned. Now in a small town like where I live, news spreads fast. So the first thing I did was call the superintendent to get to the bottom of what was going on. The results of that phone call were extremely concerning. I was informed that this is happening in districts across the state, and they do not have the tools to prohibit these types of distractions. It was cited as a civil rights issue and the district's lack of resources to engage in a potentially lengthy court battle. To put it plainly, that's nonsense. A student exhibiting non-human behaviors or identifying as an animal in the classroom is not a civil rights issue. It's a distraction. If administrators feel they are left without standing to fight these distractions in their districts, or feel they lack the ability to make the changes themselves, we will give them the tools to do so. HB 54 simply adds an additional tool to the toolbox for our educators to handle these types of situations. This legislation was very carefully crafted to not interfere with the theater, mascots, or elementary-age children playing pretend. Schools and their students should have the ability to have fun theme days, dress up for Halloween. However, they should be able to do so without fear of extreme everyday distractions or rumors of them. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the committee sub, which after having some conversations with members on the floor, we made a couple changes in the committee sub that moves this through for students in grades 6 through 12. So the elementary school kids are not affected by this bill, and we also add an exemption for students with disabilities. And I'm happy to take any questions and would like to reserve my right to close.
All right, members, Chair recognizes Representative Tallarico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Gurtis, for being here. I know we've been joking about this bill, and I agree this bill is a joke, but the consequences for our students and our educators is not a joke. So I have a lot of questions that I want to try to get through, and I know the hour is late, but I do think this is important. You claimed, quote, schools have been provided litter boxes for students identifying as animals, end quote, when you introduced this bill. Is that correct?
When did I do that?
That's a direct quote from your press release announcing the bill.
Provided litter boxes?
I'll read it to you again. The quote is, schools have even provided litter boxes for students identifying as animals. Do you recognize that as being
Sure,
one of your quotes?
I'll take you for your word.
Okay. Can you name a school where it has been confirmed that students are using litter boxes?
Well, what we do with this bill is we prevent that from happening, but what we don't take out, and I know we've talked about some active shooter situations, and there's been talk that this bill will ban the litter box for active school situations, and they're called the go buckets, which this doesn't affect that. This is for the students that are, or per se, the litter boxes, if there are any in the schools, then this would take care of that for students that are using them in if they have them out in the restrooms.
Okay, and respectfully, Representative Gurtis, we bring bills that solve problems, and when you introduced this bill, you said schools have even provided litter boxes for students identifying as animals. I'm asking...
And that's what we've gotten some reports of. Did I go to these school districts and visit and see it with my own eyes? No.
And what school districts reported this?
That we got reports from?
Uh-huh.
We got reports from Well, and Smithville confirmed they
Okay.
did not have one.
Yeah, because you mentioned Smithville in your
And
layout.
Right.
As
That's
being
about
where you
the
heard
furry.
about
I
this.
never said that Smithville had a litter box. I want to be clear about that.
Okay, and I want to be clear that you cited Smithville in your layout and in your press release, but I have the minutes from last month's Smithville ISD school board meeting, which reads, quote, "At this time, the district has no concerns related to students behaving as anything but typical children. Representative Gurtis contacted Superintendent Cheryl Burns to ask if there were any litter boxes for students on district campuses. Burns informed Rep. Gurtis there were not, but as a courtesy to Rep. Gurtis, Ms. Burns made the extra effort to walk the campus to confirm that there were no litter boxes." Is that your understanding of what happened?
She did confirm that there wasn't, but she did confirm that there was a student identifying as exhibiting these non-human behaviors.
I'm just reading from their minutes. At this time, the district has no concerns related to students behaving as anything but typical children.
And that's fine, but I'm talking about the conversation I had with her in November.
Well, she's rejecting that
And-
accusation that you're making.
And she can do that, but I know the conversation that I had with her.
Okay, and so I just want to ask the question again. Can you name a school where it has been confirmed that students are using litter boxes? This was at the top of your press release. This was mentioned when you introduced this bill, created quite a stir among public school educators across the state. And so I'm asking, can you name a school where it's been confirmed that there are litter boxes being provided to students?
For this purpose, no, I cannot on the litter box side, but I
Okay.
can on the furry side.
So your tweet about this bill was flagged by the app itself under their community notes, and their fact check said, "Sensationalist claims about furries literally behaving as animals and receiving accommodations such as litter boxes have been repeatedly debunked as hoaxes." Is that correct?
It was flagged on, what is it, community notes?
Okay. I find it concerning that these types of debunked conspiracy theories are being used by politicians at the highest levels of our government, including in this legislature, who know that they're incorrect. Are you aware that Governor Abbott said, quote, "Kids go to school dressed up as cats with litter boxes in their classrooms"?
Sure.
Are you also aware that when the governor was asked by the Dallas Morning News to name a single school where this happened, he couldn't? And PolitiFact called this a pants on fire false claim started by online rumors?
Okay. Or do you want me to name a specific example?
I've asked if there's an example of litter boxes being provided to students.
And I answer that question, but we.
Do you,
wanna
so I
talk
guess
about-
my question then is, do you think it's a good use of our time to write laws based on debunked internet conspiracy theories?
Well, this isn't, this piece of legislation before us covers that among other things that are true. A whole host of other things that I'm more than happy to talk with you about.
I guess my concern is that instead of holding a hearing about student mental health, instead of holding a hearing about school closures across Texas, we are spending precious legislative time toward the end of this legislative session on a bill called the FURRIES Act.
And
And honestly, Representative Gurtis, this whole thing is just weird and honestly a little creepy. And I think that's the point, because this is all, in my opinion, a manufactured, debunked smear campaign against our Texas public schools.
Absolutely not. And one of the reasons that we're here, you know, I live in a small town. And when one of my administrators just tells me in our conversation when we were talking about this, that they didn't have the tools to stop it, that is one of the reasons that I'm here. Because we just want to help them have the tools to get some of the distractions out of the classroom so we can get back to teaching time and stop the distractions.
But Representative Gurtis,
that's the bottom line.
respectfully, the distractions you're talking about, the ones you use at the top of your press release, you just told me you can't name a single documented case of that actually happening.
On the litter box, but the furries, I can.
You can then,
And that's where, I mean, the bill says in here litter box, but it also says,
and you
other
use
things.
litter boxes to literally roll out this bill to the public.
well, we want to make sure it covers the watershed.
And it's not just you. I mean, Governor Abbott has used this litter box rumor to paint our schools in the worst possible light. He even used the litter box conspiracy theory to push his private school voucher bill. And so I think that's because if you want to defund neighborhood schools across the state, you have to get Texans to turn against their public schools. So
Well, that's
you
not
call,
what we're- that's not
so
what
you
we're trying
call
to do.
librarians groomers, you accuse teachers of indoctrination, and now you say that schools are providing litter boxes to students. That's how all of this is tied together. That's how I see this bill. It's how a lot of educators across our state see this bill, as part of a smear campaign. I mean, these culture war attacks are nothing more than an effort to discredit our public schools to justify defunding those public schools.
Well, we're
And-
not trying to, all we're trying to do is provide the tools that I was told they didn't have to stop this type of
We just
behavior.
went over the school in your district that you cited in your layout has come out and said that it's false, that there are no children acting as animals and there are no litter boxes on the campuses.
Well, in that
So
conversation that I had with my superintendent, I took her at her word.
I would hope so.
Right.
And the fact that they had to come out, your own school district had to come out in their public school board meeting and debunk the false conspiracy theories that you were peddling is a problem. And it has real world consequences for our educators. And so I just don't think we should be spending the last few days of this legislative session on a bill that is searching for a non-existent problem. And I do think that we should be spending our time actually improving student outcomes. Texas librarians are not grooming kids, Texas teachers are not indoctrinating kids, and Texas schools are not providing litter boxes. And I think the most disappointing part about all this is I think you know that. I want to ask you a few questions about the language of the bill. So your bill provides, includes language that prohibits students from engaging in certain types of, quote, non-human behavior, which is defined as including, quote, licking oneself or others, end quote. Is that correct?
That's correct?
I am worried that there are developmentally normal behaviors, things that any child might do that could be punished under the language because it's so broad and unclear. So let's just use this example because there are actual monetary fines along with your bill. So this is not just a humorous thing. There are real consequences. If a student eats Cheetos and then licks the cheese dust off their fingers, would that be considered licking oneself?
Yeah, that's not a non-human behavior if you're licking your fingers because you got food on them. That's kind of in line with the normal behavior.
But you're
of-
defining non-human behavior as licking oneself or others.
If it's in this non-human behavior realm, the intent of the bill is if for licking oneself for the grooming purposes like a cat.
So who decides whether the licking is non-human behavior? Is that the Attorney General's job if your
No,
bill becomes
this is
law?
the local school districts come up with their plan.
But all there needs to be is one complaint, and the Attorney General, the top cop in the second largest state in the union, is
No.
now tasked with investigating that behavior?
That's not necessarily how that plays out. This goes through the teacher or the administrator to see, if the kid is acting out and not licking Cheeto dust off themselves, to be sent to the disciplinary office. The other side of that is if a parent has a reasonable belief, and they can file a complaint, but the Attorney General does their due diligence, they don't immediately get fined. And then before there's ever any type of a fine assessed, they make sure, that they're in compliance with the language of what the school has implemented for their plan.
I mean, I would just hope that the Attorney General has better things to do than investigating licking or that kind of behavior among kids. So you have an exception in this bill for a student involved in a school performing arts organization. Is that correct?
Yes.
But what if a teacher wants to put on a classroom play, which is pretty common? So things like Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, one of the characters has their head transformed into the head of a donkey, but that wouldn't be part of a performing arts organization, so would it lead to a fine under the current language of the bill?
I'm more than happy to work with you on some language for that type of thing. You're more of an expert in this space than I am, and I'd be more than happy to work with you on some language that you'd feel comfortable with to add in here to make sure that that type of thing is covered.
I mean, again, to be honest, I'm not comfortable with any bill that's going after a non-existent issue. What if a kid went to the Alamo with their family over the weekend and bought a Davy Crockett fur hat from the gift shop? Would wearing that hat be considered wearing fur?
It's wearing fur, but, you know, the school districts have a plan, you know, do they allow hats in the school, or, you know, or not? When I was growing up,
my point,
we didn't
Representative
wear
Gurtis,
hats to school.
is that there's no reason to write a bill this broad where the only exceptions have to be thought up by this body. Would you perhaps be willing to add an amendment to your bill clarifying that a principal can exempt behavior that is not pervasive or disruptive to the learning environment?
Sure.
I want to ask about the animal sounds. Your bill penalizes schools when students engage in barking, meowing, hissing, or other animal noises that are not in human speech. Is that correct?
That's what it says.
Your bill has certain carve-outs, Halloween, theater. Does your bill have a carve-out for instructional material?
For, what if you're playing something on the TV?
Well, so
Like an
it's
animal documentary?
it's
of some
common
sort?
for teachers to use books, plays, films, songs that feature non-human characters to teach lessons. You know, I was a sixth grade language arts teacher, so things like Charlotte's Web. For older students, things like Animal Farm, which of course is a political allegory told through talking farm animals. So if a student is reading Animal Farm and they oink like a pig or neigh like a horse, would they be subject to a $10,000 fine?
No, because that's in line with if it's in line with the curriculum that the.
Is that in your bill?
This is talking about I mean, you know, like I said, I'd be happy to work with you on making
Okay.
sure that we have things that are in line with normal curriculum, that are covered, outside of this.
Okay, I want to talk about the enforcement. Is it true that school districts are fined up to $10,000 for the first violation?
Yes.
And is it true that school districts can be fined up to $25,000 for subsequent violations?
Yes, that's what the bill states.
In this version of the bill, is there any accountability for false accusations?
No.
Okay, because accusing a school district of encouraging students to act like furries is a pretty serious allegation, and it isn't hypothetical. So just a year ago, an individual accused one of the school districts I represent, actually the school district I grew up in, Round Rock ISD, of lowering lunch tables so that students could eat like dogs. Beyond the absurdity of that, the superintendent had to make clear that the school lunch tables could not even physically be lowered. But those false allegations caused serious harm to our school district and took time and attention away from the classroom, away from teaching and learning. Now, I imagine that those kind of frivolous tweets or Facebook posts, conspiracy theories, I imagine what those would do if they came with the full force of the Attorney General and his office. I mean, defamation is a very serious threat that I think this bill opens the floodgates for. So for the AG, is it true that your bill gives the job of investigating furry behavior in Texas classrooms to the Attorney General?
Yes, they're the ones that would look into the complaints.
So we're sending the Texas Attorney General to investigate Texas public school children based on claims made by just anyone?
Parents of,
Only parents?
right, under a reasonable belief.
So who can make an accusation?
So the intent would be for a parent of a student that's in that school.
What does the bill say?
The bill says, let's see here, where it, a parent who reasonably believes that a school, district, open enrollment charter school, or employee of, or contractor of that district or
So-
school is in violation.
So it can only be a parent that makes the complaint.
That's what it states.
Okay. So I guess the last question I have is, does the Texas Attorney General have better things to do than policing a child's actions in a public school?
You know, we'll have to leave that up to them.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rich.
All right. Chair recognizes Chairman Leach. I'm sorry? Okay. All right. Members, we will move on to testimony. Reserve your right to close.
Yes, sir, thank you.
All right, Chair calls Adam Kudlarek, Quinn McCall,